am Dani Gasparini, and welcome to this segment of Penn Voice. I am joined by Charles Stone, and you'll give me a minute to tell you about a few of his hats that he wears. So Charles Stone is currently a city council member in the city of Belmont. He also is the chair of the San Mateo County Transit District Board of Directors, and also comes to here as a resident of Belmont, of course. Charles, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And I should say, by day, you are an attorney.
I am.
So I'm talking to you today as someone who's been interested in transportation, obviously, for most of his adult life, someone who is a resident in San Mateo County, and obviously very interested in how we move people, not only in our local communities, but how we move people throughout the state, which then lends us to this idea of transportation. We have Proposition 6 that is on the ballot measure for this November. Tell us about what Proposition 6 is.
Sure. Proposition 6 is on the ballot through the result of a signature gathering initiative to repeal Senate Bill 1, which passed last year by a successful margin. Over 2/3 of the legislature voted to pass the SB 1, resulted in an increase in the gas tax and some other fees. The issue that they were seeking to address was that for many years, gas tax revenue hadn't kept pace with roads repair, infrastructure repair needs, because increasing fuel efficiency standards meant people just weren't buying gas the same way they were in the 70s. And with the advent of EVs and hybrids, it got even worse. So Proposition 6 is trying to repeal SB 1. SB 1 generates about $54 billion over a number of years for California's infrastructure, our eroding roads, bridges, streets, and everything that goes along with that.
And I think one of the things that we should point out is, just from a structural standpoint, SB 1 was a legislative bill that went through the legislature. So our local assembly, men and women, and senators in California voted to pass SB 1, and as you said, in a great margin. When a proposition comes up on your ballot, it's basically, the intent is a grassroots effort by people who gather signatures. Now, there's all sorts of controversy about how those signatures are gathered, because there has been practice to pay for signatures. So, but we won't get into that political part of the conversation. But typically, propositions are brought forward by, and the ability for citizens to say, I want this voted on in the state of California. So there's a difference between how SB 1 was brought to us in the state of California versus how Proposition 6 is being brought to us. But the main part of it is to repeal what this gas tax was implemented over a year ago. Can you cite some of the projects that are now on the drawing board because of SB 1?
Sure. First of all, I'll just point out, as of, I think, 2016 or early 2017, California had over, I think, $80 billion in deferreds, roads, bridges, streets and highways, unfunded repair costs. And the $54 billion that SB 1 generates doesn't even cover all of that, right, but it's a huge step in that direction. Here in San Mateo County, we stand to gain about $365 million. And I can give you, I know Belmont's numbers pretty well. So in Belmont, for instance, we're projecting about $650,000 a year from SB 1. And that's significant money for us when it comes to roads maintenance. We've got some other sources of revenue, but we're cobbling them together with SB 1 money, and we're able to actually make a pretty big inroad in the roads, if you'll forgive the pun.
Give us some examples, and using Belmont as an example is great. So is it potholes? Is it light? Is it roadway efficiencies? Is it wayfinding? What are some of the infrastructure projects?
Sure. Well, here in San Mateo County, one of them is work on 101 to make it flow better. Okay. That's one of the major buckets of money in San Mateo County, and we've been very lucky to have advocates like Senator Jerry Hill and Assemblymember Kevin Mullen, who've been fighting to make sure that San Mateo County gets its fair share, and Assemblymember Mark Berman, who've been fighting to make sure that San Mateo County gets its fair share of SB 1 money. But in Belmont, for instance, we are able, through our half-cent sales tax Measure I and the extra money we get from SB 1, we're able to bring 50% of our roads up to snuff in 5 years. And for a city that had the worst roads in San Mateo County a few short years ago, that's significant. Filling potholes is great, and some of this money can be used for that. But at the end of the day, what you really want to do are capital improvement projects, because a pothole fill is a Band-Aid where you really need a permanent fix. And so to be able to take roads like in Belmont, Masonic, or Middle Road or Buena Vista that haven't been touched in ages because they're just so bad, it's really expensive to fix them, and actually finally pave them is huge. And the residents are starting to see that, and they're pretty happy about it. That said, you know, I am sensitive to the fact that some people simply feel we're overtaxed, and they feel like there ought to be a better way. Simply put, this money is going to be employed in San Mateo County and across the state, and there's no replacement for it. That's just a fact. If we lose this $54 billion, it doesn't come from any other way.
Right. So if people are feeling it's going to backfill from another part of the budget, then they're mistaken in understanding that information. You have a sample ballot on your lap, and it's one of the things that we pointed to earlier when we were talking about Measure W, and that is that this ballot also will give opponents and proponents of Proposition 6, so that people can really read for themselves what is the intent of repealing this gas tax, SB 1, as you pointed out, and then what are the opponents who are saying, no, do not vote for Proposition 6. Because I think a lot of times what happens, people get confused. Am I voting for something or am I voting against something? And I think there's some confusion about, well, what is Proposition 6? If I vote for it, is that a good thing? That makes you think it would be a good thing, but it actually means that you would be repealing something that was voted on a year before.
Yeah, anytime that you're dealing with a repeal issue on the ballot, people start to get confused, and that's understandable. We're all busy and we don't have a lot of time. So that's a reason to really, really look at your state information this year and do some research online. Understand the pros and the cons really well. A yes vote for Prop 6 is repealing Senate Bill 1 and taking all that money back, and there's no backfill for that. A no vote on Proposition 6 says we're going to keep SB 1 and the funds that it generates.
Right. And people can read again in their sample ballot what some of those more detailed components of what Proposition 6 would be. So what are the kinds of things that, should people agree with the repeal, the things that we might lose in not having this gas tax for San Mateo County? So there's some idea and examples of that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. You know, there's a campaign for each side. You can visit their websites, and they both present information like that. And if you're not into seeing the partisan rhetoric, you can Google this stuff pretty easily and find out what kinds of things your city, your county stand to lose if SB 1 fails. I'm sorry, if SB 1 succeeds. See, I did it.
Right. It's, and you're very close to it. So it's one of the things that we want to make sure that our viewers really understand across the ballot when they're voting for. Sometimes yes positions mean actually a negative side to a conversation or an idea or a ballot measure. So along that, I want to touch on one thing, and that is the complexity of funding transportation measures, whether, again, it's local potholes or state interchanges or state highways or even public transportation. One of the things that we need to make sure that our residents understand is having the ability to have local, county, state, and federal funding all pooled together to get your projects in your community shovel ready and built is a really important strategy. So coupled with Measure W, SB 1, and some of the federal transportation measures, is real important for everyone to understand how that all fits together.
Yeah, all of these things are complementary. We do hear from folks sometimes, well, you just passed a toll increase. I thought that was going to solve the problem, right? Or what about, you know, I remember 10 years ago there was some half-cent sales tax. Why didn't that solve the problem?
Right.
The simple truth is a lot of these projects, roadway projects, bridge projects, interchange projects, are so massively expensive that no one measure is going to fund all of them. But if you bring a number of measures together and a number of funding sources together from different levels, state, regional, and county, for instance, you know, some of the projects that might get done under Measure W couldn't be done if there wasn't SB 1 money and RM3 money available as well, right? By itself, it wouldn't do that. But when you bring these things all together, they synergistically work to make sure we can keep progress going.
Charles, thanks so much for helping us understand a really complex issue, not only how we fund projects, but how we think about projects and how we even bring priority to a county that's very diverse in its communities and its needs. So thank you so much for distilling that for us. And we'll see all of you next time. Remember to read your sample ballots and understand your propositions, your measures, and all of the individuals that are up for election this year. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.